What's a small act of kindness you were once shown that you'll never forget? So once in high school, I ate at a Mexican restaurant and unknowingly threw away my car keys on my tray. When I was done eating, I went and asked a worker if he had cleared them off the table, and he said no, but that he had just taken the trash out to the dumpster. I remember going outside and calling my dad to ask if there was a spare, and he told me no. So I went back inside feeling humiliated and about to ask if I could look through the dumpster, only to see that this man had already dug through the dumpster on my behalf and ended up finding my keys for me. He just went above and beyond, and to this day I'm so grateful for his help. I have a kinda similar story. I was at a restaurant downtown where I live, about 30 minutes with public transport. I borrowed my mother's 1-year subway card, which was pretty expensive for me, but managed to drop it under the table. Card slid out of my pocket. After I ate, I took the subway home without realizing I'd dropped it. Came home, couldn't find the card, and started to panic. Took the subway back and just about managed to catch the waitresses closing up. As I explained my situation, one of the waitresses recalled that she had thrown the card in the trash thinking it was an empty card. I offered to dig through the trash myself, but apparently one of the girls in the back had overheard and was already digging. She found my card and was probably just as excited as me to find it. I'll forever be grateful for her help. I missed my train to go home for Christmas from uni due to a crash near the station. I was completely broke and knew I wouldn't be able to afford another ticket. Life just got on top of me, knowing I'd have to spend Christmas alone in my chisty student house and not being about to see my granddad, who was in rapidly declining health. I was bawling my eyes out on the platform when a janitor appeared out of a hidden stock room under a stairwell and brought me some tissues. He found out why I was so upset and said leave it to me. Took me to the customer service desk and got them to reissue me a ticket for the next train home. I was so thankful I started bawling again, and he went on his way. Then just before I was about to get my train, he found me on the platform and gave me some snacks and a can of Coke, and it's just the nicest thing anyone's ever done for it. Wow, I feel like I'm walking through a museum, and every single story of kindness I read looks like a masterpiece painted by the most skilled craftsman. It's unreal how much beauty there is in these simple acts of kindness. Thank you so much for sharing this story. Alternator died while I was driving home from university. Engine died as I exited the freeway in the middle of the night in a not so pleasant part of town in the days before cell phones. As I'm pushing my car out of the intersection, a guy in a truck comes up and offers to push my car to my neighborhood a good 3 miles away. He does so, and I'm pulling into my neighborhood. He simply gives a wave and drives off into the night. I never even had a chance to thank him. Ones like this always get me a little more, where the person is very obviously just doing it to be a good person, so much so they don't even let you say thanks. I broke my foot and was trying to limp my way across campus with crutches in the pouring rain. Someone ran over with their umbrella and walked across campus with me so I wouldn't get rained on. This reminds me of a time in 3rd grade where I had a really messed up leg after an injury resulting in internal bleeding caused by my hemophilia. I was limping across the school grounds when a much older student helped me by picking me up and carrying me all the way to the other side. I was in New York City taking a lunch break at a job I absolutely hated. I was sitting eating alone at a McD's, and after about 15 minutes this man in his 40s or 50s, I'm a 28 years old male at the time, goes up to me and says something like, "Hey man, you look really sad. Things will get better," and just shook my hand. Takes a lot for one adult man to offer that up to another strange man. Really cheered me up. Edit. Wow, woke up to this blowing up. Most upvoted comment yet, and thanks for the golden awards. Moments like that can be so powerful. I had a friend invite me out to dinner once, and when I arrived, she just hugged me. I broke down and cried. I'd been struggling with depression for so long and nobody close to me had noticed, but this couple had met on holiday and seen a few times since had seen something and took the initiative to ask, "Are you okay?" without having to ask. I was around 19 years old in my first year of community college. My dad has lost his job and my mom was supported my entire family. We were struggling for a while. I remember being in my nightclub one day starving. I figured there'd be no dinner, so I told myself I'll go straight to bed when I get home and not think about being hungry. When I got home after clap, there was a giant box of Costco pizza on the kitchen counter. Apparently one of our neighbors had bought it for us because my dad fixed a part of her fence a few months back. I think it stuck with me because A, I was so ducking hungry, and B, the chances of her bringing food that night of all nights was insane to me. It might sound so stupid, but I'll never forget it. Edit. Holy cheese. Thanks to everyone who commented with your own similar stories and wished me well. I was not expecting this, and I appreciate all the kind words. I'm doing well now. Hope you all are too. Love to all. I bet that pizza tasted so good too. I literally coasted into a gas station out of gas on my motorcycle, then realized I didn't have my wallet. Some lady saw me patting all my pockets and that I was upset and offered to fill up my tank. I only let her put $5 in, which on a bike is a lot, but it meant so much to me. I ran out of petrol on my 125 not long after I started riding. Didn't realize I'd go through my reserve as fast as I did. I managed to get a few more miles down the road by laying the bike on its left side to get a few more drops into the carb, but eventually it wouldn't work anymore. I was about to start pushing when a guy pulled up next to me and said no fuel. I said yes, and he told me to wait. About 10 minutes later he came back with a jerry can of petrol and poured it in, but before I could offer him anything he said, "Happens to the best of us," and drove off. He was a biker too and had the same happen to him once. He saved me the trouble of pushing the bike or getting recovered. I wish I knew who he was so I could repay him. After my dad passed away, my depression kicked into overdrive. I went to the doctor and got a prescription for antidepressants. While I was picking up my prescription, I started crying. When I apologized to the pharmacist for crying like a child, the pharmacist said, "You don't have to apologize. You recognize you have a problem and you are trying to fix it. That is a brave thing." It changed my perspective on treating my mental illness. I'm proud of you for getting the help you needed. Hope everything is going well for you. Close bracket. I was 9 years old, waiting for the school bus in Wisconsin winter. I had a thin coat, no hat or gloves. A woman driving past saw me and stopped, giving me a blanket from the back of her car. It was a long skinny one, so she wrapped it around my head and shoulders like a big scarf. I remember thanking her, but being confused. I told her I didn't know how I would give it back when I was done borrowing it. She hugged me and said not to worry. I still have that blanket. I love that you still have the blanket. I took my sister, who's in a wheelchair, to the cinema for the first time on my own. At the end, I realized I couldn't undo the brakes and was blocking everyone. I felt like crying because I thought everyone was pissed at me, but some nice lady helped me, then took me and my sister out. She said she once had a son who needed a wheelchair. This was long ago, but I'll never forget. Once had a son. Ouch. Last year my son and I went to Lowe's to buy his grandpa a weed eater and a certain attachment that goes with it. Grandpa is a little older and slower than he used to be, but he does a lot for us, so we wanted to spend a little money to help make his life a little easier. As we get there, there's only one of the attachments left that we wanted. Well, there was a guy there getting it down for another customer. My son looked devastated. He knew how much his grandpa had been wanting this stuff and we were going to surprise him with it. My son looked at me and quietly said, "That's the last one. What are we going to do for Pa now?" Well, the guy overheard and saw the look on my son's face, so he casually handed it to me and said, "I think Pa needs this more than I do. I'll just get an IOU from the store." It was such a small moment for this guy, but it's one of those things that you witness that will literally help shape my son and his view of the world. After that, the saying, "It takes a village," didn't mean what I thought it meant every time I'd heard it before. Instead, it just made me realize that society, as a whole, is impacting all these young people in so many ways, and most of them don't even know it. This made me choke up a little. I've posted this before, but I had finally decided to get out of my abusive home. I went to my college's financial aid office to see if I could qualify for a dorm. I was $50 short. I remember looking at the ground trying not to cry. I had finally gotten the courage up to leave, and I still couldn't do it. The financial aid lady touched my shoulder, looked me in the eyes, and said, "I believe you." It was the first time anyone had flat out said they believed I was being abused. She took out her own credit card and paid the last $50. She went with me to sign the lease and to get the key to my dorm. I stood with the key in my hand and realized I was getting out. I was going to be free. I broke down. She hugged me and told me to pay it forward eventually. I have no idea what her name is, but to the woman at Dixie College who took a chance on me, thank you. I pay it forward by speaking at therapy groups about how to choose not to be a victim, and by sponsoring those who are in similar living situations as I was. Edit. Wow, I will try and answer all your questions individually, but I miss you. Here are the answers to the most popular ones. First and foremost, if you're being abused, tell someone. If they don't believe you, go to the next person. Go until you find someone who believes you. It took 22 people before I found someone who believed me. If the person you want to tell is me, that's fine, but tell someone. There is power in speaking your truth. Second, only because I no longer live there, I will say that yes, this was in St. George, Utah. I no longer live there because while I did get out that day, my abuse wasn't suddenly over. I moved far enough away that I felt safe and started from the ground up. Third, I've gotten DMs/questions on how I teach people to not be victims. It's hard to describe it into a few sentences, but it boils down to choice and to insert. I'm a survivor. You can be too. Fourth, a couple people in my DMs stated that I deserved the abuse, or that I was using the fact that I help people deal with their trauma as just my excuse to not deal with my own. No one deserves to be abused. Also, I never claimed to be a therapist or a doctor. I'm just someone who talks about her individual experiences and how I still live a functional life despite it. I will forever and always be someone who, when needed, someone can come to. Fifth, yes, I'm writing a book on my experiences. It's called Walking on Broken Glass/Walking on Shards. I haven't decided which, but when I'm done, I'll promote it in here. Sixth, there seem to be two camps of thinking on Reddit, one where you don't thank people for rewards, and one where you do. I tend to try to be polite, so thank you. Totally tearing up at your story. Neighbors asked to borrow my truck. Told them I could not trust my truck because the tires were bad. Next day, Mr. Neighbor called and said he was getting new tires for his Suburban and I could have his old ones. Told me to just show up at this certain tire shop and they would put them on. Get to tire shop and they put on brand new Goodyear tires. I asked what happened to the old tires I was supposed to receive. Shop owner said the old tires was just a story to get me in the shop. Mr. Neighbor bought me a full set of new tires instead of the old tires he said I could have. I guess they can borrow the truck anytime after that. D. The time my car broke down in the middle of the night and my phone died and I didn't know what to do. A random stranger pulled over and told me we all need a little help sometimes, and I'll never forget her words as she helped me jumpstart my car. I've shared this before and will share it again because these people were amazing. Once, I took the scenic route home through a windy mountain road. A beautiful 30-minute detour around traffic. Great view, windows down, smelling the earth and leaves. Amazing drive. No cell reception, just beautiful mountain road. I got a branch stuck under my car. Small car, huge branch. Pulled over in a small pullout on the side of the road to get it out. The pullout had a ditch perpendicular to the road. I rolled slowly right into it, covered in leaves and overgrown grass. My car was nose down in a tiny ditch, back wheels 3 feet off the ground. Ducked, but easily got the branch out. Oh man. Then, this big pickup came around the bend and saw me. There was a couple who wanted to help me, but they didn't have anything to tow me out with. Just then, this random moment in time, a person walked their dog by, there are no sidewalks up there, and said, "Hey, I live right here, I'll get chains." He walked to his house, came back in 10 minutes with his large pickup and chains, hooked my car up to both trucks and they pulled me out. I'd been there all of 15 minutes. In a sparsely populated area, with little to no traffic. Car nose down in a ditch, and no cell service. We all inspected the damage, nothing major, but the first couple escorted me off the mountain to make sure I could make it home. I got off the mountain between sheer luck and unbelievable kindness, and will never forget. Choking to death on a roadside and a nice guy stopped and did the Heimlich on me. Thanks bro. Edit. More details for those asking. Leaving a park with my son. Put a hard candy in my mouth. Said something to my son. Candy slipped down my throat. Immediately knew I was ducked. Couldn't get air. Threw the car in park. Left my son wondering WTF. Started flagging down people on street. Guy and his girl stopped. She started to go dark. Made universal choking sign. Guy understood. I could tell he wasn't sure what to do, so I guided his hands to correct position. After 4 or so heaves the candy popped out. I gave him a big hug and we went our ways. Scariest moment of my life. Not dying per se, but dying in front of my son. Holy chiz, choking is one of my worst fears. You were so lucky, that guy knew what to do. Deleted. A guy I rode the bus with stole my Darth Vader PSP from my bag and tried to have another guy from the bus hold on to it until he sold it. The other guy took it and said no this isn't right and returned it to me that day. The thief had watched porn on it, so I had discovered SpexNet, so guess that's 2 good deeds. I transferred in the middle of 1st grade to a school that did ice cream Fridays where you'd pay like 50 or 75 for whatever kind, and then you'd watch an educational video in the classroom. I was unaware of this when the first Friday rolled around, so I didn't have any change and neither did the kid next to me. Normally there would be a few who didn't get ice cream, but this day we were the only 2. So the teacher called the both of us aside and gave us each the change required to have our ice cream. I think the biggest thing was that she didn't do it in front of the other kids, so it looked like we had brought the money all along. It was incredibly kind of her. She was a wonderful teacher outside of that as well. TLDR, I and another student didn't have money for ice cream the day everyone else did. The teacher bought us ice cream, so we wouldn't be left out. Edit. I'm going to try to reach out to the school to find the teacher and send her an email, if possible as a lot of you suggested. Open bracket colon. Now that's going above and beyond the Call of Duty. It was very awesome of her. My gym teacher purchased me lunch in 3rd grade after I dropped mine. I'm 34 years old and still remember this. My gym teacher buried me in front of the entire grade. I too still remember this. When I was at school, I helped a girl out when she was having a meltdown in the bathroom. A few weeks later she pretended to be my friend who had been waiting to meet me when I was being followed home by 2 guys. We never saw each other outside of those 2 occasions, but I still think about her and hope she's doing okay somewhere out there. Bonds made in the women's bathroom are unbreakable. 1. In middle school, my softball team lost a match. A girl from the other team walked over to me and handed me a blue pouch. At first, I couldn't open it, so I said, "Thank you," and walked with my parents to my car. After examining it for a while, I was able to open it and pull out this really cute softball necklace. I still have it to this day. 2. I had to get a spinal fusion surgery for my scoliosis. During my week-long recovery, one of the nurses asked me what my favorite candy was out of the blue. I told her, chocolate. During her next shift, she walked in with a huge tin full of chocolate and a cute stuffed sloth. I still have the sloth. She also put up balloons and a happy birthday sign for my sister who was visiting me. 3. Another nurse cried when I left and hugged me. I was literally astounded by their kindness towards me. I felt really bad that they had to take care of me all the time during my stay, but they really made me feel welcome. Also, my surgery was successful and I'm basically pain-free. This makes me feel so old, but when I used to play softball and we'd travel to the big regional or national tournaments, we'd get these enamel pins made of something that represented our team or city or whatever really and trade them with other teams. I loved it. It was so sweet to see these girls from across the US and sometimes beyond collecting these pins and learning about new places. I also remember showing these pins to some of my school friends who did not play softball and they were way less than impressed lol. At work I was complaining about heartburn once. I was still pretty new to the job. Didn't really have any work friends. Felt like an outsider. My life outside of work was pretty chiz as well. The bartender on shift overheard me and ran to a nearby coffee shop to get me a chocolate milk. It definitely made the heartburn go away, but it was such a needlessly kind act. I don't think I'll ever forget it. 2 years later we are still friends, and she is definitely one of the kindest people I've ever met. Wow, the last part made me smile. That's so lovely to hear. Some people are just so lovely, aren't they? As a boy, I developed rheumatic fever and had to stay home for months to work through it and recover. When the lady next door found out how sick I was, she made a big pot of homemade chicken soup. It was delicious and full of healthy fresh ingredients. To this day, mom believes that it was this woman's kindness and love she put into her soup making that helped me recover faster. This is so heartwarming. That's such a nice thing to do. When I was young, 19, I lost my wallet and someone used my license to rack up tickets. It was pretty obvious once courts looked at the location of the tickets and what vehicle was used, the signature, that it wasn't me. I had to go to around 3 courts clearing it up. The third judge was the only one with a problem. He said I had failures to appear since the tickets were ignored. I explained what was happening and how I've been dealing with this, and I came in as soon as I was made aware of the issue. He wanted to put me in jail because he didn't trust I'd be back. He wouldn't look at my paperwork because it was an arraignment. He would only look at it during the trial date. I didn't know what to do, but I had the name of the public defender memorized. I asked if I could talk with her first. He called her in and said, "This young man seems to know you." I quickly explained what was happening and showed her my evidence. She told the judge that if he didn't release me to come back, she'd pay my bail out of her own pocket. He scorned me but released me. I just had to return the next month during the trial date. I was 19 then, 39 now. Let there blossom on planet Earth 1,000 public defenders with hearts of gold like this one. Great story. Thanks for sharing. I was out of a job at a time that I had to support my mother. Finally landed one, but I had to walk back and forth, and I didn't have any shoes that would hold up on the walk or the work. Went to FB and mom asked around for some hand-me-downs we could buy from someone. A day later a very kind man showed up with a brand new pair of really nice shoes he had just gone out and bought for me. He left before I could even get any money for him. I cried. Sometimes the hero is the one who asks. A friend of mine has a son who was dating a girl with a really bad home life. She broke down at their house once because she started her period and couldn't afford tampons that month. My friend found out she only had one pair of shoes that were falling apart, one pair of jeans she wore every day, and a few hoodies. The girl was my size, so I pared down a few pairs of Nike shoes I'd never worn, a couple of Lush bath bombs and gift cards to Belk and Penny. My friend took her to the mall, said she only bought underwear and bras, since she barely had any that fit. It meant nothing to me, since it was all stuff I had around my house but everything to that girl. There were about 6 of us that dropped off stuff for the girl, who said it was more than she'd ever owned in her life. I recorded a homemade album with my garage band in high school and handed out a few CDs. A few weeks later my English teacher approached me with 5 pages of notes on what he liked and what I could improve on. He apparently got the CD from someone at the high school and listened to it all the way through. It was over an hour long. He didn't know I was the singer and guitar player until he asked the person who gave him the CD. He said that if I ever got a shot in a studio, I would create something amazing. Thank you to all the teachers out there who believe in their students. It makes all the difference to some of us. Removed. I have 2 moments that I'll never forget. When I was younger, my mum was depressed and we had very little money. It was either heating or eating a lot. An old lady around the corner from us would invite us over for tea sometimes, or breakfast before school. She knitted me, my baby sister and my mum cardigans, socks and a blanket each one winter when it was really bad. I was at a terrible time of my life at 17, had a bad day at work, and then my train home was 1 hour plus late. I just started crying at the train station and was really wondering if it was all worth it. A woman just held me for a bit while I cried. She was a complete stranger. I've never seen her since, but I needed her, I guess. I think she saved my life that day. Hope you and your mom are all doing much better these days. Moved from a city to the country. I bought a large metal wine rack at a yard sale without thinking of how I would get it home. As I stood outside my car measuring, knowing damn well it wouldn't fit, an older man came up to me. He asked if I needed help getting it home and offered to follow me in his truck. I thought, okay, I'm getting robbed, but it was only $40 and I couldn't get it home anyways. The older man followed me home and helped me bring it into the house. We talked for 5 minutes or so, and as he was about to leave I asked him, I just have to ask, what made you do this today? The man extended his hand to shake mine and said, just doing my good deed for the day. I was floored. I'm never moving back to the city and I see this sort of kindness all the time where I am. I moved from Florida to Milwaukee in a U-Haul with everything. Arrived pretty late and wanted at least a mattress to lay on. My girlfriend and son were behind and they were going to be exhausted as it was already nearly 10 p.m. I grabbed a couple boxes closed to door and ran them inside. My next trip there were about 4 or 5 guys, early to mid-20s, walking up the street towards me. Growing up in Florida, spidey sense was tingling, but I was a man on a mission, so I ran the next load in, so I had presents by my stuff. I'm a fairly large intimidating guy, so I figured if I was by my stuff, they would walk on by. I went back out and posted up in the truck, and the dudes just walked straight up my ramp into my stuff. Experience kicked in, and I puffed up ready to swing when the big one in front asked, is it all going inside? Thoroughly confused I nodded yes, and in 30 minutes these total strangers had all my stuff inside and my bed set up. On the way out they said bye. I offered some payment, or really offered anything, but they were walking home from dinner, didn't want cash, almost seemed surprised at any offer. 3 years in that place, never saw them again, but really drove home that Florida blows monkeys, and not in a good way. I was bullied in elementary school and an older boy defended me. He became my first crush, and I still remember him. Wholesome AF. I worked in bridal for 6 years, which means I was berated by hormonal bridezillas nearly 5 days a week for 6 years. After one particularly awful day at work I decided to get chipotle for dinner. I was defeated and exhausted. The girl making my burrito bowl genuinely asked me how I was doing, and I nearly lost it. She was the only person to be kind to me all day. I held back tears during my entire transaction. That was about 3 years ago, and I think about her kindness often. Please be kind to retail and food workers. Once in high school I was ordering a burrito at Chipotle. The woman emailing my burrito asked if I wanted guacamole. I asked how much it cost. She said $1. I hesitated for a while, trying to decide if guacamole was worth $1 to me, and eventually said no. When she thought I wasn't looking, out of the corner of my eye I saw her add a scoop of guacamole to the burrito. She probably thought I couldn't afford the guac, which wasn't exactly the case, but it still warmed my heart. I was working in a medical field, and after the course of a few days, I worked with 4 members of this family, starting with the dad, who was just an awesome human. Then the next day he came in with his son. Later that afternoon, he came back in with his son again, for his daughter's apt. I genuinely fell in love with this family more and more after each member I met. The father, son, daughter attended the mother's appointment with her the next day. At this point, I was considering proposing to the son, as I wanted to be a part of this amazing, hilarious, loving family. I informed them I regretted I wouldn't be there when they came back in 2 weeks, as I was moving on to a different position. They came back an hour later with a nothing bundt cake, with the sweetest card and an inside joke written on the outside of the cake box. It made me cry. My family life has always sucked, and meeting them was just so beautiful and healing. Edit. Thank you kindly for the award. Did you propose? When I was 10 plus / played Little League. When the team won a game, everyone would go to the dairy barn for an ice cream cone to celebrate. Had an artsy coach one year who determined that if you didn't play in the game, you didn't get an ice cream. I didn't play one game that we won. I wasn't very good anyway, but still I went to the dairy barn just to hang with my friends. Others usually went home. The lady server asked me what I wanted, and I told her that I couldn't have one because I didn't play in the game. She gave me a funny look and went on to the next customer. Later, as we were sitting at the outdoor picnic tables, This same lady came out and gave me a huge ice cream cone. "You're still a winner," she said and walked away. I still choke up a little when I think about it. Duck that piece of chiz, coach. I was given access to a shower and a hot meal after being homeless for 9 months. I've been saving hotel soaps from my work trips to help someone or maybe a few someones in my community. Riding my bike on a long trip through Canada. With about 50 miles to go, I had a major mechanical failure. Stuck on the side of the road in a foreign country. Within 5 minutes at least 10 cars had stopped to check on me. One guy loaded my bike in the back of his truck and drove me 30 miles to the border, where I could catch a ferry back to the US. Amazing kindness and generosity toward a stranger. He just asked that I pay it forward, and to date I've helped 5 cyclists who were broken down in honor of that promise. Canadians are so nice. They don't want anything in return. Just pay it forward. So, there was this one time in the 1990s. I was helping my brother move from a teaching job after college. This was in the middle of nowhere in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. He was driving his little pickup truck pulling a trailer, and I was driving my crappy little Ford station wagon, packed to the gills with his stuff. It was a Sunday. I'm driving along, and my car just dies. No warning, nothing. I coast to a stop on the side of a rural highway and wait for my brother to realize I wasn't behind him anymore and turn around. After about 20 minutes, he finds me, the hood up, and neither one of us knows very much about cars. Soon, though, a man from the house we broke down in front of comes out, takes one look at the engine and says, "Timing belt." We inquire about getting the car towed the 30 miles to the closest large town and realize that it was going to be an expensive repair, even if the engine was okay and not ruined. This man, though, he takes on look at the situation, sees 2 broke kids in their early 20s just trying to get by in life, and he says, "Well, it's Sunday. Nothing's gonna be open. I tell ya what, my next door neighbor is a mechanic. Let's push the car down to my driveway and we'll see what we can do." So that is exactly what we do. His neighbor calls his buddy at the auto parts store, which is closed on a Sunday, who does a favor and gets the parts needed, drives them 30 miles out to the house, and well, sit around telling stories while the car gets fixed. This man's son, a kid of about 9 or 10, is hanging around. He is extremely bored. There were no kids nearby his age, and he's craving any kind of interaction, even with 2 guys in their 20s. The kid goes, "Want to see my tree house?" and points to the woods out back. My brother and I look at each other, shrug, and say, "Sure." We end up spending 2 hours with this kid, helping him build his tree house. When we are done, we go back to the house and the car is all fixed. My brother and I have maybe $60 in cash on us, combined, and try to pay the man who did the work, but he refused. He said, "No, you boys were in need of help, and I wanted to help. You don't need to pay me. Plus, you kept my son occupied for several hours, which I truly appreciate." He then says, "I want you to do something for me, though. The next time you see someone in need of help, and you have the means, I want you to repay this favor." And that is one of the rules of life I live by, taught to me by a generous man in the middle of nowhere who helped me out when I was in a time of need. I'm so glad you got that beautiful rule from this stranger. Keep it up, homie. I had just lost my insurance and my epilepsy medication was over $400. The pharmacist got me some coupons that cut the price in half. She didn't have to, and it was against company policy. I now work in a pharmacy in the chain, but she did it anyway. Very nice lady. This makes me smile. I was visiting a friend for his birthday 8 hours away from my home state and got really sick with something. I ended up in the hospital after 2 days of hell. Hospital thankfully was covered by insurance, but the medication I tried to pick up from Walgreens wasn't. The man behind the desk helped me in a similar manner and got the $200 something pills down to $20 something. I was so thankful. After that, I cried in a Sonic parking lot because of his kindness and the fact I was finally feeling better enough to eat for the first time in days. It was just so overwhelming. 3. I'm so glad you got to experience something similar. During the single most difficult time of my life, a stranger on Reddit gifted me $500. To me, it was a fortune. I received it while at work and just broke down. It started the change of my life, and a few months later I was able to move, met my now fiancé, had my son, and found my job. I still message them once in a while to update them on my life and continue to thank them for their generosity, but I think they abandoned their account years ago. Edit. You all have inspired me to write them another message. It's been a while. And a shout out to everyone who has or wants to do something similar. I hope you understand how earth-shattering, in the best way possible, those kind of gifts can be. Well damn. Paging you / the Tredditor. When I was little I was waiting for my aunt in a supermarket. Whenever someone exited the supermarket the doors were automatic, so every time someone left I stood by the doors and pretended to magically open the doors. One person said thank you. I want to be like that person. I was at a concert and a couple behind me gave me a VIP pass to get a picture with the artist because their friend couldn't come. Never will forget it. Whoa, talk about generosity. Damn, that's generous. I've shared this story before, but I'll never forget this small act of kindness. When I was a kid we didn't have a lot of money, so we often shopped at thrift stores. What I loved about that was that you could get 10 books for $1, so I would plant myself in front of the book section and make piles of which one I wanted to get, and then decided after I'd gone through them all. One day an older lady saw me sitting with my piles and asked if I liked to read. I told her I did and showed her a few of the books I found that I liked. She smiled and then pulled $1 out of her purse, handed it to me and said, "Promise me that you'll keep reading." I was so happy and immediately stood up and said that I would. She smiled and walked away, and I went back to my piles able to pick out an extra 10 books to take home. It was just a small act of kindness for her, but for me having a random stranger encourage my love of reading and making me promise to never stop definitely had a lot to do with my continued love of reading. This was probably over 20 years ago, but I still think of her whenever I buy a new book. I've read this post before. I don't remember where, but I do love this story. Thanks for sharing it again. Close bracket. I was trying to fly internationally for the first time to visit a friend in the UK in spring 2010. You know, that year that the volcano erupted and you couldn't fly into or out of Europe for quite some time. I rode up to Chicago on the train not knowing if I was going to have a flight or not. It was just all kinds of extra stress on top of the stress of trying to travel internationally for the first time. Ultimately I didn't get to go. Flight got cancelled shortly before boarding. The airline gave me my money back and I just hopped the train back home. But the flight was still scheduled when I got to O'Hare, so I checked in and went to sit at the gate. Couldn't eat, trying to read with a tear-stained face that most people were ignoring. This older couple came and sat right next to me at a time when the waiting area was pretty much empty and simply began a conversation. Husband and wife trying to get home to Amsterdam, had been stranded in the US for days, but came and talked to me. Didn't acknowledge the state my face was in, but they knew anyway. They didn't have to, and it was some very small kindness after a really rough day. I'll remember those folks and their kind, distracting conversation for a long time. Not many folk kinder than the Dutch. I was around 6 years old and went out to ride my bike. My parents were behind me walking, and I was going ahead and coming back to them every 5 to 10 minutes, but I forgot to turn around and realized I'm lost, so I started crying after some unsuccessful attempts to find them. One kind man probably in his 60s stopped and asked me multiple questions about what happened and who were my parents. It turned out that he knew my grandpa. He contacted him, got my parents' numbers and called them. They decided where to meet, and after 20 minutes we were there. I was so happy and relived and thanked the old man. He lives in the block of flats as my grandpa, and I sometimes help him by carrying the groceries or fixing something in his house. I would never forget this act because things could have gone wrong for me. Now you have a friend for years and memories for a lifetime. I had a troubled home life as a young man. The summer before grade 9, I was basically by myself. I needed to get school supplies, and the closest Walmart was miles away. I tried hitchhiking in the August Florida sun, and it sucked. Yup, as in subs with Jesus fish kept palming me by. Finally, an old Latino dude in an old, busted up sedan offered me a lift. He didn't speak much English, but he did know Walmart. Got me there and tried to give me a couple bucks, which I was too proud to take. Good dude. It seems like, more often than not, it is those with the least who offer the most in those situations. Good on him. My first semester in college was horrible. I was, and still am, in a deep depression. One day I was walking home from school and a guy running by said, "I like your shirt." It was that simple. I didn't know him, and I didn't care at that moment. It made me feel happy because I got a genuine compliment. When I get compliments from friends or family, I often feel like they are giving me them because they are obligated to. This guy didn't have to, so it felt real. Little thoughts like that often go unspoken, and it's a shame. I always make an effort to compliment someone and say those nice thoughts out loud because, exactly like your story, you never know who needs a smile and whose day you'll turn around simply by expressing a small kindness. I hope your depression gets better. It's a hard illness. I struggle with it too. You're not alone. I had a coworker about 10 years ago. We became work friends, but he was moving to another state. So on his last day, he brought and gave me an iPod Nano, back when they were fairly new, completely filled with different music that we had talked about or listened to together. No one had ever done something that thoughtful for me before. I could have cried. If you're out there, Gabe, that's something that I will always remember. This made me sob. What a special and kind thing to do. After the recessions and our house's foreclosure, my family and I were homeless during the summer between my 4th and 5th grade in school. When school started back up, I went to live with some family friends who clothed, fed and loved me as one of their own. Not only that, a few weeks before moving in with them, one of my mom's coworkers heard about our homelessness and secretly organized a fundraiser for my parents out of the state park they were living in. Along with about $1,000, they got me a book bag filled to the brim with all the school supplies I would need for the year. Still brings me to tears thinking about. I just graduated high school this May, and I'll never forget it. Well done on your graduation. When I was a lad, about 14 or 15, I was rushing home to make my curfew. My bike wheel slipped sideways and I crashed my bike quite badly and messed myself up a bit. My wedding tackle got the full crossbar treatment. I gashed my elbow and took a blow to the head. These were the days before helmets. A random couple picked me up and collected up my bike, went to a phone box and called a taxi for me. Then paid for the taxi to take me the remaining 5 miles or so home. My parents went from "what times do you call this" to "you're going to hospital" in a heartbeat. Turns out my injuries weren't too bad, but without random strangers, I've no idea how long I'd have been say at the side of the road before I started the walk home. Thank you, random strangers. This is the first time I've heard wedding tackle. I told my coworker I just really missed home, and most of all, a home cooked meal. I was 19 and moved away from home for the first time to a big city for a job opportunity. I'd never been away from my mom before, or even been alone for longer than like 2 weeks. I could cook basically nothing and everything I did was just missing something, so mostly lived off takeout and microwave meals, which I was starting to get really sick of. I just wanted a nice meal made with love and fresh ingredients. Anyway, I told my coworker that, and the next day she came in with 5 homemade meals in containers for me to eat for the next week. The day before, she conjured up a conversation about allergies which I didn't even think was anything more than a usual conversation, until the next day. It made me cry, and she didn't understand why I was so overwhelmed and surprised, because it was just something she did every day, but for her own kids. I don't think I will ever forget it. It was truly just so sweet, and the meals were so good, so comforting. Truly tasted like they were just made by the hands of loving parent. Or what? Such a wholesome story. Thank you so much for sharing it. I can totally relate to this, because I left home pretty young too, and sometimes it just feels nice when somebody shows up for you and takes care of you for a change. I fainted walking up steps on my way to calculus at university. A stranger caught me and put me down on the landing. If it wasn't for him, I would have gotten very hurt. I'm a fairly short woman and I've caught both the people who fainted around me. It blew my mind that I was able to respond quickly enough. In both cases it could have been real ugly if I didn't catch them. Glad you had your own ninja. When I was in my early 20s, I was pretty broke. I would usually eat at my dad's house when I could get over there, but otherwise it was usually ramen or something else cheap. One of my buddies would come scoop me up and take me to the gas station to get something to drink, and then take me to Taco Bell to get some volcano tacos. We'd cruise back to his house and he'd always have a blunt rolled and ready. We'd smoke and eat, and he'd bring me back home. He did this every week until I got some money saved up and I could afford my own Taco Bell. He never asked me if I could pay him back, and he never expected anything. Thanks Calso. Now that's a real homie. For real. God bless all the real homies that were there for us when we were hella broke. I was holidaying in Europe and extremely late for a train to the airport. My suitcase was almost my size and just as heavy. I was really struggling with it. My train was arriving, and I was at the very top of a long flight of stairs, out of breath and exhausted. I put my suitcase down, paused and took a deep breath, trying to gather myself a little before this trip down the stairs. A man, maybe late 30s, had walked a few steps down the stairs, stopped, turned around, looked at me and then at my luggage, and then kindly nodded his head at me. He took a few steps up towards me, picked up my suitcase and slowly walked ahead of me. I followed. At the very bottom he put it on the ground, just as my train was arriving, and kindly nodded his head at me once again. I thanked him. What a lovely man. I'll never forget it. The first time I traveled abroad with my young son was honestly enough to restore my faith in humanity. There wasn't a single time I struggled with his pushchair, because every single time, someone would help me with it immediately. When I was 26, broke, living on my own, and developed a reaction to latex and non-latex condoms. Still don't know why. Anyway, I decided to get the implant birth control and went to the family planning clinic. I was filling out the forms, where you input your salary and insurance info. I didn't have insurance, and once the medical assistant looked over my form, she realizes my income was $200 a year over the limit, where they provide full coverage assistance, meaning I wasn't eligible for their financial assistance, and was going to have to pay about $1,000 out of pocket, just for the birth control. Not including an exam I needed. She very quietly explained this to me, and then in her normal voice said, "So let me get you a new form, wink wink." She gave me a blank one, so I could refill it out, and list my income at what they considered to be the limit for assistance. Because of this, I was able to get the physical exam I needed badly, including medication and a 3-year birth control implant for free. I was living paycheck to paycheck, barely scraping by, working full-time and overtime, wearing worn-out clothes and shoes with holes. That woman was a freaking lifesaver for me. The gap between the US government-mandated poverty line and the actual cost of living is astounding, and I think we will look back at it in horror someday. I was bullied a lot as a kid. There were 3 boys in the neighborhood who were always really mean to me. Well, there was a new kid who had just moved in, like half the size of the neighbor boys, and he already had a target on his back because he was very flamboyant. Well, one day the boys were picking on me and this kid. It was the first time anyone ever stood up for me, and man, he got pissed. He got his ass kicked. I felt terrible, but he was super happy about it afterwards. I wish I remembered his last name. I hope he has an amazing life. A random lady bought my chocolate bar and my soda after my card didn't work because it was the wrong company and the register was glitching. So I went out and she came after me and gave me my stuff. I was so surprised. That is so sweet. I had just ended a 3-year relationship in a city I knew nobody in, started a new job, and worked on my birthday. I had hit it off with the lady who trained me, and when the hour manager stopped by and wished me a happy birthday, she seemed surprised I never mentioned it. I explained I was in a bad place mentally and just told her I didn't feel like celebrating. On her lunch break, she went out and got me a single fancy cupcake from the grocery store up the street. She barely knew me. I literally clutched that cupcake in the break room and sobbed. Plot twist, her son ended up working with us a few months later. We dated, got pregnant, and I in return gave her a grandson. The long con by that woman to get herself some grandkids. JK, of course, that is such a nice gesture. Was 10 years old. My dad told me stay where I was while he went to get his car. I was feeling petty, so of course I followed him. We were pretty deep into the hood and eventually I lost sight of him as he was walking at a faster pace than me and I had to stay a certain distance behind so he wouldn't see me. Thought I was so clever. Ugh. Anyway, when I realized I was lost I started panicking. Eventually I came across this pharmacy store and there was an old Asian man smoking outside. I told him I was lost and I didn't know where my dad was. He assured me everything was going to be okay, put me on his motorcycle, and took me to the police station. Looking back I realized how stupid I was and how tired cold been my death day if the dude was some weird child kidnapper. Definitely not the right move on my part, but I'm forever grateful for the stranger who helped me out. You heard it here first, folks. Don't be petty or you'll end up being lost XD. Your story is hilarious. And the Asian man is the real MVP. I was paying for groceries at a Trader Joe's and the cashier, F, 60 plus, asks me what I'm doing this weekend. I tell her I'm actually graduating with my master's degree on Saturday. Her eyes light up, beaming smile, and tells me congratulations and to wait right there. She comes back a minute or two later with a small bouquet of roses and tells me to celebrate my accomplishment. Particularly meaningful since my parents could not make the ceremony. I thanked her, gave her a smile and a hug, and never saw her again. My daughter ran away from home a year and a half ago. She was home and gone many times. During those months I was so sad and sometimes couldn't keep it together long enough to make it through shopping without breaking down. I live right by a Trader Joe's and go in there often. They too gave me flowers on a few occasions when they saw me desperately sad. It was the only bright spot that kept me going at times. I went to the customer service counter a year later and told the manager how much it meant to me. My daughter still doesn't live at home, but things are better. When coronavirus became bad in our area I sewed masks for all the employees. I went to South Africa for my gap year after school. I had saved all year for a month's trip and it was the first time I'd traveled alone. Culture shock / anxiety and the realization of how far I'd come hit me and I ended up crying in the bathroom of Johannesburg airport. A kind lady noticed me and asked me if I was okay. I sobbed and said I just couldn't believe I was on the opposite side of the world from home and I'd worked so hard to get there I just felt overwhelmed, and she gave me a hug and said some kind words I can't fully remember, but I felt much better after she'd been kind enough to check that I was okay. 3. I came home to South Africa after working on a cruise ship for 7 months. And because the cruise line booked the cheapest ticket ever and I had to take 4 different flights by the time I got to Joburg I was late for my local flight. Then some dude tried to rob me. My bank cards wouldn't work. My SIM card had been deactivated because I was out of the country for too long. So I had no way to call my mom and tell her I'd only be on a later flight. I looked around for someone to ask if I could use their phone and this group of about 4 women looked approachable. When they said yes I burst into tears and she called my mom and said I have your child here. She's a bit upset but she's okay. So I told my mom I'd be there on a later flight etc. The next day this incredible woman called my mom to check that I got home safely and that everything was okay. As kids, my younger brother and I spent our summers at day camp. My brother was probably 5 years old and had a tendency to hold his pee all day until we got home. One day, our mom was running late on picking us up, and he wet himself. I remember being really embarrassed and unsure what to do. Luckily, one of the camp monitors was quick to help and get it cleaned up, so that no one noticed. He then lent my little brother an extra pair of his shorts to change into. The monitor was a big guy, so he took a shoelace out of his own shoe to tie his large basketball shorts around my brother's tiny 5-year-old waist. I still remember how nice and reassuring, even to me, the embarrassed older sister, he was that day. I've always struggled with my appearance, but it peaked one day when I saw myself up close on video for the first time in about a year. I thought I looked awful, and I lost all self-confidence. Extreme and a bit silly, I know. I stopped putting any effort into my appearance for a while, and went outdoors only in sweatpants and t-shirts. Then, one day, my best friend had her birthday party. I thought it'd be rude to her to show up looking like a slob, so for the first time in a while I curled my hair, put on a dress, and did my makeup. As I was walking home I passed a couple, and, presumably, their daughters, probably 4 and 6 to 7. As we passed each other I saw the younger girl staring at me, and then she exclaimed, "Wow, look, wasn't she beautiful?" I walked around a corner and actually cried a little. Children are so brutally honest, and knowing that somebody's first reaction to me was beautiful was a type of encouragement I've never felt before. That comment still sticks with me, and I think about it when I start doubting my appearance again. This one made me tear up a little. I'm determined to read this comment thread to the end. So freaking wholesome. I was 17 and tried to kill myself by odding. I was in a coma for 4 days, and when I woke at some point a nurse gave me a little back rub. She was just there for me, and that loving gesture meant the world. I will be 61 this Friday. Glad you're still here. I'm now required to do my job from my home, permanently, which meant disabling my gaming PC and setting up my workstation at my only desk. My agoraphobia has been triggered by the COVID crisis, and gaming is how I get a little zen. I'm also disabled, and my available activities are limited. This was causing a depression and anxiety spiral. I reached out to my brother about an issue I was having with my internet connection, and we caught up a bit. I told him about my lack of gaming, and that I was planning on getting a Switch when the prices stopped being jacked up. A little while later he sends me a message letting me know my new Switch should arrive by my birthday. I love that magnificent jerk. He saved my sanity. Upvoted for the magnificent jerk. Thanks for sharing the story too. Thanks for this today everyone. I needed to see the good in the world. Well, this is one of the many things has done for me, but my English teacher let me borrow his bay over summer so I can learn/practice. I already learned a few songs lol. I came out of my classroom and tripped, but some random kid way older than me pulled me up and kept walking. That reminds me of something that happened sometime last year. I was in the subway waiting for a train, and when it pulled up the doors opened, and this guy tried to step out to let people off, but he misstepped and his foot went between the train and the platform, and he started to go down. I quickly grabbed him and pulled him up, and then I walked into the train. It happened so fast, and I think the guy was really confused on what happened. 1 second has about to have a pretty bad fall and a split second later he was lifted up and was fine. After a few stops he came over and asked if I had helped him up. I said yes, and we shook hands and had a good conversation for the rest of the trip. I burnt my hand pretty bad at work. I was dropped off at an urgent care by a coworker. I was sobbing, barely able to talk because of the pain. The receptionist was extremely rude to me. I had an older man who was waiting on his wife come help me with everything, taking my wallet out of my purse for me. I had to wait a while before I was seen. He sat next to me, told me little funny stories about his grandkids. He even had me hold his hand and squeeze it tight to try to take my mind away from the pain. When I was finally called back he wished me well. I think about him sometimes. He didn't have to do that, but he saw that I was in pain and wanted to help. Edit spelling. I was in a very abusive relationship at 19 that I wasn't fully aware of at the time, and living with the guy. I'm at work and realize I don't have any money for food and was just asked by management to stay late. So I called my BF and told him I had an unopened check waiting for me at home and asked if he would bring it to me at work so I could cash it and get some food on my break. He was unemployed at the time, so it didn't seem like a big deal to me, but he said he was out with friends, drunk at a bar, and wouldn't leave, so I would just have to figure it out. This was before Venmo and Cash Apps, so I couldn't ask him to send me money either. I was so frustrated and complaining to coworker about what a jerk he was, and a woman overheard my story and offered to buy my lunch. I pleaded with her not to give me any money because I didn't want to sound like I was scamming or anything. It also happened to be Mother's Day and she insisted that as a mother she wouldn't want her kids to go hungry, so she couldn't bear to see another kid in that position with no one to help. It was only $10, but I still hid in the bathroom and cried. I don't have a mom. so it was pretty overwhelming at the time. This girl in my HS class who found out I made art, and despite me trying to keep her distant, she gradually got me out of my shell. It's because of her that I also met the love of my life years later. Her reaching out to become friends pulled me out of a dark void that surely would have been my end after high school. I loved that girl like a sister. Never got back in contact with her, and I later found out some ex-friends of mine took advantage of her sexually. I regret never being able to get her out of that situation. Haven't forgiven myself for it. Edit. Thanks for your kind guys. You're all really sweet. See, I'm gonna look her up online. Hopefully we can reconnect. I hope one day you run across her contact info again. The summer after my ex-wife tried to kill me, I was on vacation with my family and my kids. My dad went with me to one of those old-time photo places because I wanted some shots of me and the kids. The photographer was cute, and after the photos were taken, I flirted with her a bit, and my dad jumped in, shut me down, and told me I had no need for another woman after what my ex did to me. He then proceeded to tell her, in detail, what I had survived. I immediately left with my kids and left my card on the counter. I was too humiliated to go back to the photo place, but my mother went and picked them up. The photographer had framed them without charge, and about a month later, when I was hanging them, I noticed something through the back of the frame. It was a sticky note on the back of the picture of just me that said, "We aren't all bad. Keep your head up." It's my favorite picture of me, despite the fact it's a silly Victorian style photo. The day that my significant other passed away in ICU, I was sitting alone in the ICU waiting room at about 7:30 am. After pulling an all-nighter out of worry, I'm sure I looked like a complete mess to the hospital staff and other visitors, my eyes puffy from crying, and definitely looking a lot younger than 19 years old. A woman I had never met or seen before passed by the ICU waiting room while glancing in, before coming back a few minutes later with a Coke and giving it to me. I'll never forget her handing me the Coke while looking like she was going to cry and just telling me that I looked like I needed a little kindness in my life. She left after that, and I never saw her again or even got her name, but I hope she's doing well wherever she is. I hope you're doing okay. Story is completely pulling at my heartstrings. It was towards the end of my shift one night when I was still serving. I had been there maybe 12 hours or so at that point and was drained and exhausted. I had a super rude table that called over my manager before they left to basically just absolutely berate my appearance. Basically just a tangent about how the green hair, piercings, tattoos were hideous, and that I was ugly, and even started to off about how I was fat. It was just cruelty for the sake of being cruel. Went into the freezer and had a good cry. Decided to take one more table for the night afterwards, maybe half an hour later. The second I greeted them, one of them just immediately started gushing, "Oh my god, I love your hair so much, it honestly was exactly what I needed." And I still smile when I think about it, even though it's been 3 years. Green hair is awesome. U/procrastinator 2112 buying me a pizza when I was down and out. Edit. Whoever gave me silver, thank you so much. But it's him carrot that deserves it. Down, but never out. I had just had my first baby and I went to pick up some shopping. My daughter needed feeding and had to have a medicated formula, so I went to the cafe area of the supermarket and was juggling the crying baby, powdered milk, boiling water, cooled down water, and I just couldn't do it. An older lady came over and asked if she could help at all. I remember being so incredibly grateful because I really needed help. I cried. I said yes please. She held the baby while I made the milk and then started to feed her the bottle so I could go grab some cake from the cafe as I hadn't eaten all day. Just something about that moment I'll never forget. I learned from then that it is always okay to ask for help, and there will always be people who want to help. It's my go-to advice for new parents now. I think I've told this story before, but years ago I had the norovirus and was so sick I thought I was going to die. My dad took me to urgent care and the first doctor that saw me acted like I was being dramatic and gave me a pill to take. I couldn't even keep a sip of water down to take the freaking pill. Went back and insisted on seeing a different doctor. In walks this tiny Muslim woman and the first thing she does is take my face in her hands and say, "Oh you poor thing." I immediately started to cry. She gave me some shot in the hip and suppositories and I immediately started feeling better. I will never forget her kindness. I got norovirus 2 days after dental surgery last December. I was so dehydrated that I couldn't even cry. The Ertridge nurse turned me away, saying they had no beds. The doctor saw me on his way home, offered a bed in the hallway for a couple hours, and gave me IV gravel, a prescription for pain pills. Dentist didn't give any, and a liter of saline. I felt like a new human being after 2 hours. He was an angel. Thank you, kind doctors. Also, norovirus is a bitch. I was about 6 or 7, and I had $1. I saw these bags of cotton candy for $99, and I took it to a register, confident in buying something all on my own. And it cost $1.08 or something with tax. The man standing behind me gave me a dime and told me to remember it when someone else needs a little help. Well, I can't remember his face, but I'll never forget being taught kindness to strangers firsthand. I work at a Walmart, and my favorite thing to do is just that. I always have an ungodly amount of spare change, and there's always a few kids a day who are 25 or less short. So, I go over and give them the money. It's such a small simple thing to do, but you can tell that the kids appreciate it more than anything. This one time I was waiting for a bus, and it started raining, and a random soldier just gave me his umbrella. It's not exactly donating a kidney or anything, but it was just really nice and unexpected and I'll never forget it. When I was 11 or 12 I walked on the streets with my mom and we saw a homeless woman. I had maybe $10 in my little fake purse and I walked up to give them to her. She started crying and hugged me. I might have inherited the kindness, but the way she hugged me and thanked me made me feel good. Makes me want to be a better person each day. When I was working at a vet hospital as an assistant, one day, when I was opening up, before any doctors were present, a woman was frantically knocking at the door with her cat. He was pretty old and looked in rough shape. She was very concerned as he came home from being outside coughing and vomiting. He was stable, so I made comfortable arrangements for him and reared her until the doctor came. Her cat ended up being diagnosed with asthma and did well. Every time she came in to get food or meds after that, she was always very nice and friendly with me. I got to know her a bit. Her and her husband have 3 elderly cats and run an insurance company together. We would chat whenever she came in. One day we were chatting and she asked if I was excited for the upcoming Christmas holidays. I made a comment about how I wasn't really, because holidays are stressful with the added pressure of gift buying on top of paying rent etc, but that I was looking forward to time off. A few days later I was eating lunch in the break room and my coworker dropped off a card. I asked who it was from. She wasn't sure, but said it was a client and she had asked the card be given to me. I rushed to the front to see if she was still there, but she had left. It was a card from the woman with a note about how she wished me happy holidays and appreciated me being there when she was stressed. And $300. I nearly cried. I never expected this kindness from an acquaintance, and it came at a time when I was struggling financially and really did help me out. The next time I saw her, thanked her profusely, but insisted she take it back as we're not supposed to accept tips, but she refused and said it was a gift and she was happy to help. I work elsewhere now and haven't seen her in a few years, but think of her often. In college, at a party near my house, very drunk, I decided I'd get a burrito and return to said party. My favorite burrito place was just a few blocks away, Pancheros on Grand River, while it was open. Get to burrito place, long line, anything for the burrito. Burrito is inbuilt, nightmare scenario. I need to pay, but I don't have my wallet. Guy behind me pays for my burrito and says pay it forward. God bless you, guy behind me. You are remembered. Deleted. It's crazy how this story has come up over and over again. How simply asking somebody how they feel can have a dramatic impact on their life. I'm the kind of guy who really feels the need to really ask people how they are doing. I just realized now that I did it not because it mattered to people, but because I don't like to say things I don't mean. But now I've realized that it's super important to actually ask people how they really feel. Thank you for helping me take this practice seriously. My baby had passed away in utero a few days before, and it needed to have surgery to remove her. My husband was several states away caring for his sick father. I was just miserable, sore from surgery, my milk had come in, and overall emotional wreck. Headed to the grocery store to pick up a few things, lost in thought in front of the produce cooler. An older gentleman was stocking the cooler, and we had made some small talk about the produce quality or something. As I started to walk away, he wished me a happy Mother's Day. He didn't know about my daughter, but his words meant so much to me. I can't imagine how tough that was to endure. I'm so very sorry for the huge loss. Oh my, you watched until the end? That's fucking awesome, dude. Thanks for watching.